20 pounds with Christians engaged. I am so excited that today we are talking about our Christians Engaged book club. It's the beginning of the fourth quarter of 2021. Can you believe it? We're already at the end of the year. And we have three more books that we're going to cover in the fourth quarter for our Christians Engaged book club. If you haven't joined our book club, you need to join us now. It's going to be exciting. So the book for October that I'm going to get into with my stepfather, Brent Schoch, is Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy. Yes, our former president. This is an amazing book that we're going to get into today. In November, we're going to read one of my favorite books called The Evangelicals, The Struggle to Shape America. This was the book by Francis Fitzgerald that helped really launch Christians Engaged. It's a heavy read, almost 700 pages. But I'm going to have Francis on our podcast next month. She's 80 plus years old, and I'm so honored to have her. And then December, I don't have the book because it's not out yet, but we're going to be reading Eric Metaxas's new book, Is Atheism Dead? And we're going to have Eric on our podcast as well. So since the book that we're reading this month, Profiles in Courage, was written by a former president who is no longer with us, I thought the most important person in my life, one of my most important people, should be the one to help me discuss it, since we've had multiple conversations about it. So my stepfather's here, Brent Schoch. He lives with my mom in Anderson, Indiana. He's an elder at his church at Anderson Seventh-day Adventist Church. He's the owner of Bluegrass Farms. He grows trees and shrubs on 650 acres and has 57,000 square feet of grass greenhouse space. So anyway, wholesale supplier, ships all over the Midwest. Brent, you're a very busy guy, so thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here.
Okay, well, let's just get into it. I like to call you one of the few real independents that I know in my life. So many people are either on one side of the partisan spectrum or another, but really we as Christians should be independent thinkers. We should be kingdom-focused people. We shouldn't just buy into a political party. And so I like to really say you really are a very much an independent on different issues, and it's really always fascinating to talk to you. So let's get into this book, and you kind of brought this book to my attention years ago from John F. Kennedy. So JFK lays out many stories in this book about senators that he respected. And he wrote this book during a time when he was ill. I was reminded reading the introduction again that he did really struggle with a whole bunch of sicknesses, and he was in this point where he needed to recover. So he started researching all these senators throughout history that he respected, like John Quincy Adams, Daniel Webster, Sam Houston. We all know Sam Houston here in Texas, Edmund Ross. And he wanted to write a book to talk about how principles should trump party politics. And he was affectionately he always was fond of quoting Dante that says, the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a time of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. If people in a time of moral crisis do not take a position, what does that say about their integrity and character? So, Brent, as an independent there in the Midwest, what does moral leadership look like for you, and what are you looking for personally in the leaders that you elect?
Well, I think the big difference is that, being an independent, I'm not a follower of one person, but I'm a big believer in this country, its foundations and its principles. And I think that needs to be held up, particularly in our school systems, the history of this country. I want to support elected officials and organizations, in this country that bring an importance to hard work and self-control and responsible laws that promote the role of the family, because I think that's the foundation of society. I want to be strong in educational endeavors, personal responsibility, and accountability. And I think that's what I'm looking for in an individual, not party affiliation.
Amen. Because at the end of the day, it's about their moral compass and their moral fabric of who they are as leaders. So, President Kennedy starts out this book talking about the traps for people in elected office, which every time I read this, it really impacts me because if you're a politician and you run for office, you're social, you like people, you're hanging out with people, you're not afraid to shake hands most of the time. But you want to be liked. You want to be liked, and it becomes difficult sometimes when you have to take stands against and force some people in your constituency to not like you. They also need to be, of course, reelected. So, that's a hard thing. You've got to make choices and decisions based on whether you're going to get reelected or not. And then you have to overcome the pressures of your constituency, interest groups, economic blocks of people, and even the average voter to get the job done. So, when we think of some of the greatest pressures in our modern world in politics, and especially in a more polarized place than JFK had to endure, what do you think are some of those pressures in the modern world? And I know we've had multiple conversations on this.
Well, I think that there have been, and as you read the book, particularly, you become aware that these partisan pressures were very strong at different times before the Civil War, the founding of the Union. At different times there have been very strong partisan feelings in the country. So this is not new. But I think what makes it different now than in JFK's time is just one word: the internet. You can have, radical, false, misleading information, which we've always had, but it can go around the world in 10 seconds. Whereas before, even in JFK's time, it took a certain amount of time for public policy and for feelings on an issue to come to a boiling point, and people were able to absorb information and would absorb it over a period of maybe days or even weeks. Today, we see with the internet, the tendency is to absorb the information in just a matter of minutes and make a judgment, and then pretty soon you can get an opinion going all over the world that many times is not helpful.
What do you say to people, Brent? How do you get good information? How do you digest information? Because you're one of the smartest people that I personally know. What is kind of your counsel to young people nowadays on how to take in information and digest it, I guess, is my question.
Well, that's a really good question, because today, more than at any time in the history of the world, there's more information available at any given moment. I mean, all this information is available. So the recommendation I have is choose wisely. You can't read everything. You can't listen to everything. So what are you going to read and listen to? There's many people out there with all kind of theories about, the Earth's flat or whatever. You can get any opinion as you want. So I think first, of course, you always start with the Word of God. You look at that because that's our foundation for life. But then I recommend that you get in any subject, whether it's politics or physics or whatever it might be. You look at people who have spent a lifetime studying it and read information and publications that they have put out due to a lifetime of experimentation and study, and see what holds true. I mean, I think it becomes self-evident. When you look at statistics, I'm a big believer in statistics. When you look at them, it's how politicians measure their way forward is going with the data. You look at the data and say, does this make sense? Does it add up? And, when you consistently get bad data from a source, that's probably not a source you're going to want to continue using. You look at information that people have spent a lifetime to accumulate, not just knowledge, but the capstone of that, which is wisdom. And then you begin to see that many of these things are played over and over again. So I always say, choose wisely on your information source.
That's good. That's good. Well, JFK said in this book, the voters selected us, in short, because they had confidence in our judgment and our ability to exercise that judgment from a position where we could determine what was in their best interests as a part of the nation's interests. The founders gave us a representative government. So, what kind of gift is this? You're a study of history. As we look at other nations, as we look at other forms of government, what kind of gift did they give us? And what is our individual responsibility towards that republic, in your viewpoint, Brent?
Well, I think that Franklin said it best. We've given you've got a republic if you can keep it. And that is a struggle that the country has faced in 3 or 4 major crises. One, I think, that we're in now due to the extreme partisanship. But, I think that the way you keep that is by being an educated voter. And, to have that is a great gift, to have a republic, not a democracy. Because to have a republic means that you are bound by a constitution, and that regulates what laws, that you can't just arbitrarily make laws that adversely affect people. So, I think that is it's the most important thing in the world to have in government is a republic. The one we have has proved to be one of the best in the world. But you're going to lose that, and why Franklin was afraid you would. If you don't become and stay an educated elector, you're going to elect people that will promise you anything and deliver nothing.
Right.
we have a tendency today to trade our principles for power, and as we always say, then you wind up with neither.
Right. And so us as an educated electorate making those choices, and we always talk about here at Christians Engaged the power of voting in every election, but we can't be an uneducated vote. We have to go in, and if we do simply researching our candidates, we're going to be 95% above everybody else that walks in the polls and decides who they're voting for somebody just because they like their name or they've always served or whatever. We need to break out of some of that. Well, what were some of your favorite profiles in this book? Again, I know you've read this book several times, and kind of give us a couple of the stories that mean a lot to you and why that's important to you.
I'm glad to do that. I'm going to give you those 2 plus 2 others. But, the 2 that really stuck out to me was one, John Quincy Adams, of course, a fellow Massachusetts senator like Senator Kennedy and President Kennedy. He stuck out because he was self-contained. He seemed to let no outside pressure or influence affect his morality or his choices in what he thought was best. I'm elected to do what's best. This is what I'm going to do. I will try and convince you that that's the best thing to do. But if I can't, I'm still going to do it because I'm convinced it's best. And he was very self-contained. It just seemed like he had no interest, very unusual for a politician, but no interest in what other people thought, as long as he thought he was doing the right thing.
Well, and to pause you right there, Brent, that's really an important point for everyone to understand. You're electing representatives that have a compass and a belief system. And at the end of the day, your voice as a constituent matters, but it's never going to matter to them as much as what they actually believe. They're going to end up doing what they believe. So we need to make sure we're electing people that match our viewpoint and our biblical worldview. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble in that aspect. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No problem. The second person is that great Texan down your way, Sam Houston. Woo-hoo! And because I don't think anybody represents Texas more than Sam Houston. I mean, he was Texas.
He's the hero.
He was the founder. He was the sustainer. He was the hero of Texas. And yet, in the Senate, he realized that what the people of Texas want me to do is not going to be good for Texas in the long run. And he said, we need to stay in the union. This union is important. It has given us all the tools we need for success, and we need to stick with it. And the people would not tolerate that. And eventually, he lost all his influence and was voted out, and was not the hero of Texas for a while. But he knew it was more important to do what was right, because this was really what was right for everyone in Texas, not some of the people, not the moneyed people, not necessarily the people who elected him or support him, but it was the best thing for everyone, and he stuck with it. So, I think those 2 people come to mind. Everyone is well represented in this book, but those 2 people jump out at me immediately.
Well, even JFK, when he had the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on, I mean, there was a lot of people in his inner circle that were not with him in the way he was handling that. And he stood up and said, this is the way we're going to handle it. We're going to try my way, and then if it doesn't work, we'll have to deal with the consequences. But knowing that we have leaders in office that we can trust in these huge national profiles are so important, like Sam Houston, that thought about the overall impact on the republic or on the union.
Two great presidents come to mind too. One was Lincoln, of course, and we could say a lot of people have. But the thing that sticks out as much as anything is he was going to preserve the Union. Whatever tools he had, here was his toolbox, and he was going to use any of them and or all of them. He was going to preserve the Union. And another president who I think is overlooked a lot of times is Dwight Eisenhower, because in his time, really we were well served all the way from 1933 to 63. We look at that 30-year period, Republicans, Democrats, the world changing in unbelievable ways, and yet we managed all those changes and continued to flourish as a country. I think we had great leadership. One of those leaders was Dwight Eisenhower, and a lot of people forget he was the only president we have who was baptized while he was in office. He also is under his stewardship led out in putting under God into the Pledge of Allegiance. Also in 1956, he was instrumental in placing on all our currency, "In God We Trust." And so I think he recognized God as the foundation of this republic. And more than any president, really, he is the one who wanted to highlight God's activity in our country.
So good, Brent. Well, again, JFK lays out a lot of these profiles in courage from history of different senators. But as Brent's bringing up, we need to be fully versed on our history, guys. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this book club, is to educate ourselves. We need to self-educate and make sure that we're getting the history that we need. So many people on the right and the left of our nation don't understand, this is an important point, that the legislature is set up as a place of compromise. You have the Senate, you have the House of Representatives. A bill goes to the House, a bill goes to the Senate. They have to compromise even between those houses in our government, right, in the legislative branch. And that happens in Texas, in Austin, and in D.C. Then you have to compromise between the parties to even get something on the floor, typically. Sometimes that's not the way it is right now, but that's the way it should be. But we need, as JFK said so eloquently in this book, we need to compromise in the days ahead for sure. But where will we, or should we be compromising on issues, not on principles? We can compromise our political positions, but not ourselves. We can resolve the clash of interests without conceding our ideals. Brent, what does that mean to you personally? And how do you see the art of compromise kind of getting further and further in the rear view mirror of our nation right now?
Well, I'll start at the end there first, if I can. I think today we have a tendency for people on the right or the left, whatever, to say, I want to do what's right, instead of they can't do anything good because they're only going to do what's right. So they can't come together and say, we're going to do something good. I think of political courage that we've been talking about, and profiles in courage, it's identifying your core beliefs. If you don't know what they are, you're not going to be able to act on them. So you've got to identify what your core beliefs are and what's my goal. Okay, I have beliefs. Well, the goal of an education is not knowledge, it's action. And I think that's true in politics. So you have core beliefs. All right, now what are your goals? You've got to be dedicated to working those in a pragmatic way. And I think that's a word that we're not using. We say it sometimes, a pragmatic way. And again, for the long term, picking the right time to negotiate and the right time not to negotiate or compromise is so important. And you got to realize that when you do that, at times there's going to be a great sacrifice. And part of that sacrifice might be yourself.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have to know, I loved how you said that. We have to know what the difference is between what is right and what is good. And we can get so blinded by what we know we want to accomplish that we're not looking at the greater good. And my former boss used to say, if I can move the needle however many inches, that is a worthy endeavor versus trying to, you know, reverse the whole direction of the ship. We're not going to reverse the whole direction of the ship when the ship is running at 300 miles an hour, but we can turn it ever so slightly, and hopefully over time that would turn in the right direction. So, you know, we really want to encourage people in our book club to start getting educated and to really understand the importance of reading books, sometimes from not just our political viewpoint. That's why we're bringing in books across the spectrum here for Christians Engaged. But why do you think people should read this specific book, Brent? Why is this book meant so much, Profiles in Courage?
Well, you know, I think that this book is one of the best books that I have read that show you the tensions in politics. Many times we look at politicians and think they should think the way I do. Well, no, they shouldn't. I'm not in politics. I'm not getting elected to anything. They have to be elected, and there's a political side to politicians that there needs to be. And JFK has done the best job I have ever seen in identifying what a politician is and how he should act in a proper way, that there is a place for him to be a political person, and there is a place for him to be a principled person. And many people today don't think that you can be a Daniel and be both of those, but you can. And I think reading and rereading Profiles in Courage helps us find a needle of where we can say, I can see the balance between those two things.
That's great. Now, when you think about biblical leaders, sorry to spring this question on you, but you know, who are the ones in the Bible that were quote unquote political leaders that you get some inspiration from?
Well, I mean, the two great ones that jump immediately, besides Christ himself, who was not a political leader, but the two people who jump to the surface immediately, of course, are Daniel, because in all this we see him a leader in three different regimes, and we nowhere see that he did anything that was harmful to anyone, always holding up the good and always giving all the credit to God. And the other one, of course, is Joseph, because we see that maybe he did have some character flaws, but God used time and circumstances to mold his character so that when it came time for leadership, he was cast in God's mold. And when he took over the most powerful country in the world, is basically had almost unlimited power, he used it for good to save lives. And so I think those two people more than anything stick out.
That's great. Now, we're approaching our 250th birthday of our republic here in another 5 years. And I started talking about this a few months ago, that we need to really be focusing on the importance of the next 5 years and how we come together as a country. What are your thoughts that you share with your kids and people in your life about how we keep this republic strong and really be that city on a hill that President Reagan spoke about?
Well, I think as an underlying thing, I think one item is we need to have U.S. history as a mandatory lesson all through school. I mean, if you don't know history, as they say, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yes.
You know, if we want to build on the country we have, we need to know what the history of that country is. And so for me, really, in any, whether you're in kindergarten or whether you're in graduate study in college, studying American history is a must. And I think it should be mandatory in all public schools. And it should be readily adopted in private schools as a great learning tool. You know, and I think that, and then outside reading, which is the best thing that you can do in your life, is to continue to read and study and learn. As I mentioned to you earlier, you know, one book that has meant a lot to me, it was written 60, 70 years ago, but On Active Service in Peace and War by Henry Stimson, and it was helped to be edited by McGeorge Bundy. This was a man who gave 50 years to public service. He was once Secretary of State, twice Secretary of War, Governor of the Philippines. He served in both Democratic and Republican administrations. And because he always put the public good first, and he was able to work with anyone because he didn't have politics in mind. He said, and he also ran, I might mention, ran for the governor of New York and lost that election. But, you know, here was a very principled person. And I think reading that book as part of your American history is just a must there to learn how did we get here. Now, as we celebrate 250 years, I'm always looking forward. I don't just want to know how I got here, but I want to know that and use it to see, well, where should we go from here.
So good. So good. Well, we're going to have to include that in our book club in 2022. That's going to be a critical year. So we all need to know our history. Okay. I ask a funny question every time. So you're a very busy man running Blue Black Grass Farms, and you have odd eating habits that I happen to know. So I want to know, tell everybody what is in your special smoothie that you create every morning that gets you so much energy that you can go all the way till like 1 or 2 o'clock in the day. We need to know the secret, Brent.
Well, I'm a creature of habit, and I like to do things that work well. And so for me, every morning I get up and I put in my blender, I put some Total cereal because it has all your vitamins and minerals for the day. Total. I put shredded wheat, a lot of bulk there, a banana, crushed or fresh strawberries, whichever is available, and then soy milk.
A whole bunch of soy milk.
And a bunch of soy milk. I blend that up, and then I sprinkle nuts on top of it and eat that up, and that gives me about 1,000 calories, and I'm good till 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I've got all my minerals and vitamins.
Okay, everybody, remember, true success. This is what it looks like. And then he eats like odd things at lunch, like a piece of toast with peas on it and stuff. I don't know what you do with your diet, but anyway, Brent, we love you. Thanks for joining us today. You guys get your books. Get Profiles in Courage by John F. Kennedy. Get The Evangelicals by Francis Fitzgerald. You need to have this in your library, even if you're not going to completely read it, okay? It's worthy of your library. And then pre-order Eric Metaxas's book, Is Atheism Dead? He's going to answer that question, and I can't wait to read that book and interview Eric soon in the days to come. So you guys check that out. Make sure, hey guys, we've got our big conference coming up in a month, the Wake Up Conference. You're overwhelmed with it on my social media, but just know it's going to be so worth your time. Take a retreat Friday night and Saturday and come to the Wake Up Conference with James Robison, Allie Beth Stuckey, Congressman Michael Cloud, June Hunt, Rick Perry, Corey Russell, Kyle Martin, Matt Schaefer, Kevin Freeman. The list goes on and on. So, hey, I'm going to even speak. I get to headline after Rick Perry. I mean, you want to come hear my speech. So anyway, you guys sign up. It's only $55 for the conference. There are a few VIP seats still available. So check that out and go ahead and solidify that on your calendar, November 5th and 6th. Okay, well, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you for reading books with us, and let's have a great day. Thank you, Brent.